This morning, Alex Acosta, Trump's U.S. Secretary of Labor, resigned. The Secretary of Labor has been under fire this week because of a decade-old plea deal he made with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein when Acosta was U.S. attorney. And this evening, we have some new info in the Jeffrey Epstein case. Federal prosecutors in New York are now accusing Epstein of witness tampering. According to the prosecutors, he, quote, paid significant amounts of money to influence individuals who might be witnesses against him at a trial. Epstein's financial records indicate he wired a total of $350,000 to two possible co-conspirators. Those wires happened right after the Miami Herald published its reports about the deal made between Epstein and Acosta. Epstein's lawyers did not immediately return a request for comment. Jay Weaver from the Miami Herald joins us now. Jay, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with this latest news tonight about those wires. What does the Herald know about those?
Well, for one thing, they were disclosed by the federal prosecutors on the eve of Epstein's bond hearing on Monday. So you have to bear in mind why they're releasing this information. They want to detain him before trial. They don't want him released. They consider this accused sexual predator a danger to the community and a flight risk. But on top of that, they're indicating to the magistrate judge that you need to detain him also because he was obstructing justice and tampering with witnesses in this case, and there is no way you can assure his presence at trial if you allow him out, as his defense attorneys have requested in their own filings that were put in the court record yesterday, which was Thursday.
Jay, I want to stick with the Epstein theme for a moment and go back to Acosta in a minute. But the Miami Herald reporting this week that more victims have been coming out. I believe you reported as many as a dozen new possible victims. All of this happening, again, as you mentioned, that Epstein is trying to get bail and trying to be released. Does the Herald have any indication that you may hear from more victims? Can you tell us a little bit more about your reporting on that?
Well, my colleague, excuse me, my colleague at the Miami Herald, Julie Brown has been covering this case since November when she broke the big story, Perversion of Justice, that brought to light the voices of the victims of Epstein. And there were some dozens of them. I mean, originally there were some 36 to 42 of them in South Florida. There are now as many as 80 to 100 of them overall. And so what has happened is more of them have been coming out of the proverbial woodwork this week. And the reality is that the Justice Department, but particularly the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, is focusing on at least a dozen or 14 more. Now, they have come forward through their civil attorneys. They have contacted their civil attorneys who have been, pursuing justice in this case for years now. And they have obviously been contacting the state attorney's office in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York to present them with new evidence. And of course, the case in New York is about new victims, new evidence in New York, not South Florida.
Jay, let's talk about the other big news today. The Labor Secretary Acosta resigning because of the controversy of the plea deal with Epstein back in 2008. Now, just 2 days ago, he defended himself, saying that the evidence was different back then, that it was different than what prosecutors have now. Was it really? And what are you and does everyone at the Herald make of his defense?
Well, the reality is that Alex Acosta, is a longtime public servant and a lawyer, Harvard educated, both as an undergrad and as a law school student. He had a long history in the GOP firmament of different lawyers working their way through the Justice Department. Came down to Miami, unknown, and he eventually encountered the Epstein case. He cut this deal. It has now come back to haunt him 12 years later. It was a non-prosecution agreement, but the reality is the case in New York is a bookend to the case in South Florida. There were dozens of underage girls, 14 to 17, who were paid to have sex in a sex trafficking ring orchestrated, allegedly, by Jeff Epstein. The deal was to only seek a plea agreement in the state court here, soliciting a minor in Palm Beach County. He ended up only getting 13 months in prison. The case in New York is much more serious, and many more victims are going to come forward because it's the way these things go. He'd been trying to keep this hushed up for a long time, but it has now come back to haunt him as it has come back to haunt Alex Acosta, which is why he resigned. he found his situation untenable. He could no longer defend himself. He could no longer defend the way he handled the case. It became a distraction, believe it or not, for the Trump administration, which seems to be like a circus of distractions. But this one was too big for the Trump administration, and Acosta decided to resign on his own, or at least that's the storyline out of the White House.
You surprised by that, Jay, or are the reporters of the Herald, were you surprised when you heard the resignation today? Some people telling us that, no, they weren't as surprised by the resignation, but they were surprised by how quickly it came.
Well, I was surprised by how quickly it came, because he did do a reasonable job of defending himself on Wednesday at the news conference as to why he thought his office acted appropriately and why he cut the non-prosecution agreement with Epstein 12 years ago and allowed the state case to go forward, along with provisions in that he'd be a sex offender, registered, he paid through civil damages, some 36 to 42 victims. So he defended himself ably, but he also shifted the blame. He never apologized. Mm-hmm. He never said that he was sorry to any of the victims. He never said that, he would have done things differently. He never really showed any atonement or any empathy. And I think the chorus of condemnation grew louder and louder, and he felt like he was becoming too much of the story and detracting from the purpose, of the Trump administration. So his role as Labor Secretary became impossible to carry out. So he himself, as he indicated, decided to call it quits today. I found it pretty remarkable only because this guy has been a career public servant. Mm-hmm. He has been ambitious, but he's also made a commitment to serving the public. He was also a law school dean. He's a lawyer. Not a trial lawyer, but an intellectual lawyer, and he's been an administrator, and he's been very successful over the years. But for the Epstein case, he has had a pretty remarkable run as a Republican acolyte in the Bush, Trump era of conservatism.
All right, Jay, thank you so much for your time today, for all of your insights. We know it's been a busy day for the Herald. Thanks so much for making the time to join us tonight.
You're welcome.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.